This episode is brought to you by the Conscious Combo Network and the Black Boy Fly Club. Go to www.blackboyfly.club to learn about the movement, get books, merch, and just get connected with the brand overall. Again, www.blackboyfly.club. I hope you enjoy the next episode. Welcome to another episode of the Black Boy Fly podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Isaac Addae. Thank you again for tuning in, and thanks to everybody that's been consuming this content. I've been getting feedback on all the past episodes. I've also gotten feedback on guests I should interview, as well as ideas for other things that we should talk about. So again, keep tuning in, tell your friends. You can catch us on YouTube. We're on all your favorite podcast platforms. Check out the Black Boy Fly podcast. Today, we're going to have another interesting conversation. There's this debate going around on social media and the internet about Future and Russell Wilson. And the topic is Russell Wilson is a square. Now, let's unpack that. What does it mean to be a square? And is it really a bad thing? So I'll be honest with you. My whole life, I've been a square. It's funny, but it's true. When I was younger, all my friends said, "Man, Isaac, you're different." When I got to college, I was told by some of my frat brothers, "Ike, you're lame." And then as I got to be an adult, the conversation continues. I embrace whatever it means to be lame. I embrace whatever it means to be square. Personally, I think I'm great, but it does speak to a bigger narrative. I think that's a part of conversations within the Black community, specifically around being fly, being cool, being hip versus being a lame or being a square. All right. So let's talk about this, right? We've got Russell Wilson, quarterback in the NFL, traded recently to the Denver Broncos. All for, from most people's perspective, he's a successful Black athlete, multiracial, but considered Black athlete, right? Multimillionaire. He's done well in his career, but not only in addition to his career, outside of his career, he's maintained a great presence in the community. We haven't heard of a lot of negative things that Russell Wilson has been involved with other than losing some football games, right? Lost in the Super Bowl to the Patriots, and that was a big letdown. But this man is successful. He's married to Sierra, R&B artist. They've got children. He's also a step parent. From all intents and purposes, based on my view, Russell Wilson is a model human being. But then there's Future, one of my favorite rappers. I'll admit, I love Future's music. But he gets the label of being toxic, right? Because of his past. He's, dabbled in the streets, right? He's a trap rapper for the most part. He promotes drug use in his music. He also has multiple children by different women. But from all intents and purposes, he's also successful in his career in his own right. Multi-millionaire, millions of albums sold. You put Future on a song and it's an immediate hit. Now, who's the better person to aspire to be? Do I want my sons to say I want to be like Future? Do I want my sons to say I want to be like Russell Wilson? If my sons told me that they wanted to be like Russell Wilson, would I call them a square? Let's just go ahead and end this debate. Nothing is wrong with being a square. Some people may just have that perception of you. Again, that's the perception that folks have had about me at points in times in my life, that Isaac is a square. But I'm a square that's got 2 engineering degrees, a Ph.D. I've worked in corporate environments. I've worked in academic environments. I'm helping build a tech startup right now. Very community engaged, family oriented, and God fearing. So if that's what you define as a square, I want all my kids to aspire to be a square. Now, there are things about both Russell Wilson and Future that I think we can talk to young boys and say, you can aspire to be this, without specifically suggesting that they become that person's whole character. So, for example, let's talk about Future. All right. He's a fundamental artist in the rap game that has changed music. He ushered in or helped usher in that auto-tune era behind T-Pain. A lot of his music has really heavy trap, 808 beats. But Future is gifted as a musician, and he's reached rock star status, and he makes millions of dollars a year. He's he's somebody that I would want my children to aspire to as it relates to using your creative genius and taking those God-given talents that you have and putting it on display and using it to create culture. From that perspective, nothing wrong with aspiring to be a guy like Future. All right. When we think about Russell Wilson is a guy who took his physical talent and his body and his mind and put it to use in professional sports, reached the pinnacle of his sport, has been gainfully employed in his profession for many years, and has achieved multimillionaire status and has won at the highest level. To me, I would want my children to aspire to be that in their lives. All right. Now, when we think about it from a personal perspective, personally, I would not encourage my children to approach their personal lives the way that Future has. That's just not what I believe in, right? I would encourage my children to follow behind what Russell Wilson has done. Find a person that you love, start a family with them, have children, and grow your family in that way. I wouldn't encourage my children to father multiple children out of wedlock. Now, there's nothing wrong with anybody who feels that that's an approach that they should take in life. That's just not the approach that I would want my children to take, because that's not the approach that I took. All right. So I would tell them, if they're trying to determine who they should be, that they should look more toward Russell Wilson as an example of what your life should look like from a personal perspective. But that's just Isaac's opinion. So again, there's nothing wrong with us having these conversations and debating who our children should be like. You just have to think about what works best for you. What do you want young people to model, and provide them examples of that. We can look at Russell Wilson as an athlete, and we can point to many things that he's done, and we can tell our young people, aspire to be a version of this. We can look at the rapper Future and all the things that he's accomplished and things that he's done in his music career, and we can say, I want you to emulate that. Totally fine. But I'll say, let's stop name calling, right? Let's stop calling folks a square and then saying that that's not what we want our children to become. There's nothing wrong with that. And if you're a black male, young or old, and you're in environments and people have called you a square or they've called you lame, hey, own it. Because in my book, the guys that are the squares and the lames that were in college with me are the lawyers and the doctors and the engineers and the business owners of today. So if that's what a square is, then go be a square. But ultimately, this boils down to identity. And I think in the black community, we try to place these labels and push certain narratives on our young people in terms of the identity that they should, uphold or become or adapt to. Let's let our young people discover themselves, and let's not place labels on them. Let's let them become who they're intended to be by helping them understand their influence, by helping them identify their purpose, by helping them understand what changes they need to go to become the people that they want to become or that they're destined to become. All right. Now, again, like I mentioned, there's nothing wrong with us having conversations and debates about who's this and who's that. But I think when we start to try to put people in our community in a box, we do them a disservice. All right. You can be perceived as a square, such as Russell Wilson, and still be a dynamic black man that is very successful and is at the top of his career. You can be what many people look at Future to be and say he's hip or he's cool, but still be successful in your own right and still break barriers and still create history within your family. You don't have to necessarily be one or the other. Let's stop the narrative that black men have to be one thing versus another thing. We can be many things. We're not monolithic as a group. We're very talented. We're very dynamic. We have a lot of creativity. We should be encouraging our young men to be the best of themselves. We should encourage them to identify people that they align with in terms of their personal beliefs, in terms of what these folks have accomplished, and let them go off and be that. All right. I was just speaking at an event this week, and they asked me to talk about people that influenced me from a leadership perspective. Guess what? I said Dr. Martin Luther King, Barack Obama, and Jay-Z. Now, you might have heard Barack and Dr. King and said, yeah, those make sense. Jay-Z might be left field. Somebody may say, well, he's a former drug dealer. He got his money through music. Yeah, but there's so many things about Jay-Z that are incredible. And I see him as a man moving in this world, especially a black man. And there are a lot of things about Jay-Z that I personally look up to and aspire to become. I can do that without wanting to become the drug dealer version of him. I can look at Jay-Z and say he's a businessman that has defined hip hop culture, which has defined pop culture. He shifted the narrative around what black men can accomplish in business. I can aspire to be like Jay-Z, but I can still also aspire to be like Barack Obama at the same time. I don't have to pick and choose. So when we have conversations about Russell Wilson and Future, and we talk about Russell Wilson being a square, and we talk about Future being better because he represents a certain aspect of black identity, I personally think that that's dangerous. Why don't we talk to our children about the best of both and maybe the things about both that aren't the best and how we can shape and mold them to become better versions of themselves? That's the conversation that I'm having with my kids as it relates to their development as young black men in this world. I want them to find people that they align with and then define their identity based on those things that they see in those people. I'm never going to tell them to shy away from their personality because they may be a geek, or they may be considered to be a nerd, or they may be a square, or they may like alternative music and they don't listen to rap. Who cares? At the end of the day, who are you? Do you know who you are? Where are you going? Do you understand what's influencing you? Do you know the path that it takes to get to the place that you want to get to? Whether that looks like a Future path or that looks like a Russell Wilson path, I think it's totally fine. So let's stop with the name calling and putting our young people in a box, and let's show them examples of all of the things that they can become and help them embrace what it means to be dynamic black men. All right. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Again, it's a conversation that's been happening. I thought I'd tap in it onto this version of the Black Boy Fly podcast. So thanks for tuning in. Stay tuned for more. We've got a lot more good content coming, and I'm going to be dropping some interviews with some other people soon. So again, still having fun with this platform. Share with your networks, encourage them to subscribe, to follow, and tune in to the next episode of Black Boy Fly. Thank you.